love the idea of fictional worlds kind of all cohering in some way. You know, I love writers like, you know, Thomas Hardy or Trollope or Faulkner, where they created kind of a world, and even when you're over in this part of it, there's some little toe that comes over from this, or you'll see a character in one novel who you remember vaguely from another. So in some ways that bigger world of fiction is fun to play in. I mean, in some ways the original Sisterhood, they had a kind of a charmed experience.
The parents in this book are somewhat absent, if not completely absent.
And in a way that's part of what brings them together initially. You know, they're the 3 third-grade girls who weren't picked up from school the first day. And the 3 of them end up sitting in a math lab room, and then they end up sitting outside the office, and they make their grand escape. And it's what brings them together. And it continues to bring them together, I think, through the early years of their friendship.
Is Three Willows the start of the series?
I think that Three Willows is probably going to be a series. I like to kind of keep things a bit open. I think, particularly in fiction, when you're hoping to be led by your characters, changing your mind can be a healthy thing. Yes. So, you know, these kinds of stories still feel fragile when they're in their early stages, but I tend to love to think about characters kind of in an ongoing way. Whenever I approach a book, even if it's a book that I think may or may not turn into something more, it may be a single title, I try not to think of the characters as simply existing in this book. I try to think of them as having lives that are bigger than the book. So if they're 14 in the book, I want to think about who they were when they were 4 and 8, and I want to think about who they are going to be when they're 18 and when they're 40 even. I feel like sometimes when you think about teenagers, it's almost like that's an end in itself. That's a character trait, but it's not a character trait, it's a time.
When you speak about the characters, they sound very much alive. Was it hard to let go of the Pants Quartet? Do you still think about them?
I do. I think I tend to think about all the characters that I spend a lot of time with, and I have spent a lot of time with those traveling pants girls, having written about them for 4 books and a few thousand pages. So, and these girls too, now they're very fresh to me because I've written about them most recently. And you know, I like to write a very close point of view. I like to really immerse myself in these characters. I spend a lot of time with one, try and write her story, start to finish, before I turn to another. So the writing experience of my books tends to be very different than the reading experience. But also I think some writers, and this is a wonderful kind of writing too, but they play an almost godlike role in their books. They often will write from an omniscient or nearly omniscient narrative. They will sort of move their characters sort of as pieces on a board. And that can feel like, as a reader, that you're in wonderful hands of a storyteller, and many writers I love work that way. But I realize I tend to want to be down. I'm on the game board. I'm one of the pieces. I shift from piece to piece and girl to girl, but I tend not to rise above and look at them from above, but want to stay down and see the world through their eyes. So for some reason or other, that seems to be how I tend to write. So I do get very attached to these characters.